Hello, everybody, and welcome to Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk presented by Forefathers Organics. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, alongside my co-host, Ajay Cybulski, here for the Batavia Daily and Livingston County News. Each week, we'll discuss Buffalo's favorite football team, along with all the comings and goings from Orchard Park, thanks to our friends at Forefathers Organics in Dansville.
Unlock the power of nature with Forefathers Organics, your premium CBD store. We offer the highest quality CBD and hemp products to liberate your mind, body, and soul, helping you live happy and free. Our mission is driven by excellence and transparency, using cutting-edge scientific methods to combat stress and target issues at their source. From potent ingestible CBD to soothing topicals, all our products are USDA certified organic. Discover all natural wellness from farm to table. Visit forefathersorganics.com for more information.
All right, AJ, another jam-packed show for the people here today. A couple pre-recorded interviews with Joe Buscaglia of The Athletic and Nate Geary of WGR 550. Excited to hear from those guys later in the show. But first and foremost, we'll get to a couple of our opinions, and then we'll lead into those interviews later on. AJ, how's it been going this week? You've been thrown into the fire. First year covering high school football and the Bills simultaneously. Have you started to wither away yet? I feel like I'm hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot, doing high school and, not only football, but there's soccer, volleyball. So there's plenty of other sports that we also cover here at the Batavia Daily News. So on top of that, with Bills, and then you got Sabres, right around the corner here. So there's going to be a lot to, discuss, with content-wise and write and put together video-wise. So, yeah, there's a lot going on. But, the chaotic part of this is, I kind of enjoy it. I kind of like being on the fly. It makes days go faster. And, days are definitely going by really fast. Weeks are going by fast here. I can't believe it's already September. My birthday's a month away. I'll be 24, which is crazy. So it's just all flying. It's all flying right now.
All right, let's get right into it, AJ. We discussed the other day, yesterday, all these days blend together, kind of what we're most optimistic and concerned about going into the season. Why don't we look at it this way? What's the X factor for the team this season? I think for me, it is the offensive line. I've said it all off season long. I'm uncertain how this offensive line is going to produce. They've made some changes, Connor McGovern and David Edwards, the most notable among them, but you have so many new depth pieces as well. Obviously, Alec Anderson and Ryan Vandermark are back into the fold, but they are inexperienced in terms of a contributing role at the NFL level. So if they're thrown into the fire, God only knows what to expect from those two. And the Bills had such good injury luck along the offensive line last season. I don't anticipate the same happening this year. So I think the X factor is not only health for the offensive line, but their performance. Can Connor McGovern really blend into that center position and make that transition really an easy one for he and Josh Allen? Mitch Morse did so much for this team over the past several years in terms of his ability to pull and get to the edge. That's not really Connor McGovern's strength. He's more of a straight-ahead, powerful blocker, and I think that coincides with what the Bills are trying to do offensively, maybe not ground and pound, but maybe trending toward a little bit more of a running style this season with that loaded backfield with Ray Davis, James Cook. You bulk up on the offensive line. You have some question marks there. I think if the offensive line can produce similarly to how it did last year, this offense can explode once again. But if there are some growing pains up front, that's going to lead to Josh Allen running for his life and James Cook and Ray Davis having little to no room to run, and that's going to be a concern for this team. So X factor for me is offensive line. What's the X factor for you entering the season?
So I'm going to stay away from players because I know we've talked about, these players a lot, and, offensively, even like, Curtis Samuel could be one of those guys, right? Can he stay healthy and produce? So I'm going to take maybe a cop-out answer, but I'm going to go with the entire coaching staff in terms of coordinators and head coach. I think that's the X factor for me. Can Joe Brady hide the deficiencies of losing a Stephon Diggs, a pure alpha number one wide receiver who has immense talent? Is he able to cover that up throughout the season? And can he get the most out of this offensive unit? Can he put Dalton Kincaid in positions to succeed? Can he put Khalil Shakir in positions to succeed like he did, at the back half of last year? And then obviously on the quarterback, how does Josh Allen look under Joe Brady? That's going to be a big factor. turning the page to Sean McDermott here, his game management, will that improve? Can he coach up his defense, or, at least get those guys out there in those big moments, especially come playoff time, if the Bills are to make it, and make those pivotal stops? And then same thing with Bobby Babich. Can he cover up the deficiencies of the losses of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer on that back end with, Damar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp getting the start here in week 1? I think the coaching staff, a younger staff with Bobby Babich and Joe Brady at least taking over the coordinator positions here, and Sean McDermott, kind of the experienced veteran that's built this culture up from basically the bottom. Can this coaching staff put these players in positions to succeed? Can they execute? Do the players trust them? That dynamic, I think that will go really far in determining how, this team succeeds, because there's a lot of new faces, a lot of new, maybe not a crazy different coaching style, but I'm sure going from from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady is a big difference, right? And then going from Sean McDermott, your head coach, calling plays next year, to a Bobby Babich who's been in these, positional rooms for the past few years, building up these linebackers and safeties, now taking over the defense, calling plays in that transition. I'm going to give the nod to the coaching staff as the X factor as to, what this team can really be this year.
How about the division, AJ? How do you see the AFC East shaking out this year? We've talked about it in previous podcasts and off camera as well. In my opinion, Dolphins due for a setback. They lost so much on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, they add speed on speed, but are they going to be able to stop anybody this season? You lose a Christian Wilkins, you lose players in the secondary. You're relying on Jordan Poyer, who seems to be an aging player on the downside of his career. One of the reasons why the Bills moved on from him this offseason. So I think that side of the ball, there's plenty of question marks for the Dolphins, while the Jets, the range of outcomes for the Jets is so wide-ranging. I could see them going 4-13. I could see them going 13-4. If Aaron Rodgers is to stay healthy, their cast of characters around him are to stay healthy. They have one of the most talented skill position groups in at least the AFC East, if not the entire AFC. I love Garrett Wilson. I love Breece Hall. Mike Williams, if he's to stay healthy, I think he can be a contributor. And then you have Aaron Rodgers. If he can return to somewhat of his MVP form, I know that's kind of a far-fetched idea for some, but there's so much potential on this Jets team offensively. It's going to come down to health and that offensive line, which kind of go hand in hand. Question marks up front, but that defense is strong as ever. Quinnen Williams up front, Sauce Gardner on the back end. So this Jets team kind of concerns me from a Bills fan's perspective. If everything goes right with the Jets, they could be really good. But I think the Dolphins are due for a setback. And I think the Bills are still above and beyond everybody else in terms of just the consistency that they put on the field year after year. You have the best quarterback in the division. You have the best coaching staff in the division. So I still have the Bills at the top, but I think the Jets have a chance to unseat them this year, like I said, if everything goes right in New York.
Yeah, so when I predicted the Bills 2024 win-loss record, check it out over on the Batavia Daily News.
And we're going to get to that next, AJ.
Okay, so that's kind of what it came down to just in regards to the AFC East. I was just going to use an example. In my prediction, I had the AFC East basically coming down to a Week 17 tilt with the Jets at home. The Bills are 9-6. The Jets, I'm assuming, will be maybe somewhere around there. Maybe it won't mean anything. Maybe the Jets will stink, like you said. Maybe they get hurt. Rodgers can't, return to form, and all those. Tyron Smith goes down, and defensively, Hassan Reddick doesn't get figured out. There's so many different possibilities for this Jets team. It's kind of up in the air, but I think if everything goes right for them, which I think it will at this point, again, injuries could change that, but I think you're looking at a Week 17 matchup maybe for the division. The Dolphins could also always scare you. I think, defensively, they did add Kendall Fuller in free agency at the cornerback position. So I think that's a good addition for them. Jalen Ramsey, Kendall Fuller is a pretty good cornerback duo, but nothing really on their defensive line scares me. Calais Campbell, a bit older, a lot older in his career, probably near the tail end, maybe only 1 or 2 years left. So he's their starting defensive tackle. Jalen Phillips returning from injury. The Bills won't see him to start the year. So he's another guy that when he gets back, I think that he could be a potential, game changer for that defense, but nothing on the defensive side of the ball in terms of their linebackers. Jordan Poyer, Javon Holland. I mean, that's a pretty good safety tandem, but like you said, Jordan Poyer, how much does he have left in the tank? Their offense will always scare you. Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. They added Jonnu Smith at tight end. So they have a pretty good roster. They could make a run at it. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Miami's sitting up atop sitting atop the AFC East by the end of the year. But like you said, I think the Bills are the team to still beat right now, and I do think they can and will win the division. But the Jets and Dolphins are right there, and on paper, you could argue both those teams have, if not as good or better rosters than the Bills on paper.
Yeah, notice how we didn't mention the Patriots.
Yeah.
Things
nothing to write home about there.
Yeah, things not going to go well in New England this year, as far as I'm concerned. They start the season with Jacoby Brissett as their quarterback. That's always an inspiring move heading into week 1. But why don't we move on to your schedule prediction story that you did for the Batavia Daily News? It was already in the Livingston County News. It will be available online soon and in our preview edition for the Batavia Daily. Actually, it already was there as well. So many moving pieces, AJ. I get confused sometimes. But so available now, your schedule prediction piece. What did you fall on in terms of your overall record prediction? I'm at 12-5. I was a little bit higher on them to begin the offseason. I came down a little bit. Obviously, the loss of Matt Milano impacted things. And then I just reflected on their schedule and how tough it's going to be. It's going to be tough to work their way through that gauntlet. I have them at 12-5, AFC East champions. And in my most recent edition of Bills Digest, I predicted them to win the Super Bowl as well with Josh Allen as MVP. So, like I mentioned before, the ceiling, I think, is very high for this team. And I think they're going to reach that ceiling this year come playoff time. It might take a little while. Like I said, 12-5 record, not the best that they've had under this group, but still a quality record heading into the playoffs. And that's where I think they're going to make their money this year.
Yeah, so I have them starting, a hot 3-0. I think they get by the Cardinals week 1, move to Miami, win week 2, and then beat Jacksonville, finally get their revenge on them after, the debacles against them the past few years. The Jaguars have had the Bills number. So that game kind of worries me in terms of what's happened in the past, but I think the Bills, they remember that stuff. So I have them open up with 3 wins. The first loss to Baltimore in week 4. I haven't beating Stephon Diggs in the revenge game, so that's something that I thought they would really take, especially with the comments and just how everything ended. And I think there's both sides are definitely going to feel that game is going to be crazy. A 1:00 game, so I think both sides will feel a little bit of they'll get antsed up, I should say, for that game. And then I have them losing to the Jets, going 5-1 in the division. So I have them losing to the Jets week 6 on Monday Night Football. So I have them going 11-6. I think that I had their losses: Seattle, New York Jets, Kansas City, San Fran, Detroit, and Seattle. So maybe I already said Seattle, but something around there.
I think you did. I think you said Seattle twice.
So there was another team in there that I can't quite think off the top of my head. But Seattle I only have as like their kind of weird loss where they travel out west and, it kind of hits them, a kind of a trap game potential there coming off like a easy game against the Titans at home. I think they're an 11-6 ball club this year. I could see them anywhere from 9 to 12 wins. I think that's kind of their floor ceiling there. And with that schedule, like you said, it's so treacherous, especially, week 1 through 6. And then when you play the Chiefs week 11 through week 15, you go Chiefs, Niners, Rams, Lions, right there, 4 in a row with a bye week in there. So not an easy part of the schedule. We'll see what happens come playoffs if they get there, but I'm predicting AFC's champs. And we'll see what happens in January. I really don't know because.
Come on, give me a prediction. Do you think they're going to win the Super Bowl or not, AJ?
I do not. I think the Chiefs will win the Super Bowl. And like I said, I know this is a Bills podcast.
I'm clipping this.
I know, clip it. The Chiefs. I have the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. I told you this last night. I said next 5 years, I'll just predict the Chiefs every single year, and I'll be 60% of the time right. Everyone else can do their fancy predictions and pick the Lions or do that. I'll pick the Chiefs every year and be right 60% of the time. So. I have the Chiefs. Until they don't do it, I'm going to pick them. So I got the Chiefs winning this year again.
Yeah, they've certainly proven to be the safe bet over the past several years. I think you can make some money on that strategy. Before we get to our 2 guests, Joe Buscaglia from The Athletic and Nate Geary of WGR 550, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Forefathers Organics in Dansville, where their mission is to liberate, educate, and innovate with the highest quality CBD and hemp-derived products for your mind, body, and soul, so you can live happy and free. Visit them at 87 Franklin Street in Dansville, online at forefathersorganics.com, or call them at 585-335-2223 to learn more about the products they offer. So we'll get right to it. My interview, AJ had to sit this one out. It just didn't work out with timing this week. I don't like to leave AJ out of these interviews, but there was so much to do. We kind of had to go our separate ways for times this week. So gracious enough that he was gracious enough to allow these guests to join me. So we will get right to it. Joe Buscaglia of The Athletic. All right, here with Joe Buscaglia of The Athletic. Gracious to join us here on opening week. A lot of busyness to come for all of us in the Bills media sphere. So very grateful that he was able to join us. Joe, how are you?
I'm great, Alex. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Let's get right to it. We'll start with kind of a question I'm going to ask everybody this week. The way that I view the Bills this year, their floor might be a bit lower than it's been in seasons past. You lose all those veterans. You know what they have to offer. They have been built into the system for years, but you gain so many new players that are unproven commodities, untapped potential. A Keon Coleman comes to mind, plenty of others all across the board. I think the ceiling could be higher for this team than it has been in seasons past. You kind of knew what to expect from that group. You don't know what to expect from this group. How do you see things as we enter the season in terms of ceiling floor conversation?
Yeah, it's really a kind of a transitional year for this entire franchise because we are going from what we knew them to be over the past like 3-4 years and that version of them. And they still kind of have bits and pieces of that group, but they're pushing it forward. And they were very intentional about how they went through their offseason, doing all the moves that they did, getting rid of long-standing veterans within the team, trading away Stephon Diggs, refreshing a lot of places that quite frankly needed to be refreshed, and then trying to push it forward to see what works in 2024. And oh, by the way, the sneaky undercurrent of the whole thing is fixing their salary cap for future years and biting the bullet this year. So all of that in mind, it definitely, as you pointed out, it lowers their floor of wins. Like this time last year, we're like, okay, there's no way this team is going to do anything other than win double-digit games in the regular season. But this year, along with the schedule, kind of in question with all these new pieces. Got a lot of stuff going on with the defense. The safety position seems like an absolute mess. Matt Milano is out for the foreseeable future. They have no idea what they have out of their edge rushers right now, maybe outside of Greg Rousseau. And there's just a lot of uncertainty with that. And then on the offensive side, your one constant is obviously Josh Allen, who can raise the game for them at a moment's notice. But then you have all those new receivers, like you pointed out, Keon Coleman. What is he going to be? Is he going to be anything more than a role player in the NFL? We'll find out. Same thing with Khalil Shakir. Will they actually give Dalton Kincaid more of a role this year than they did when Dawson Knox came back from injury last year? So there's just a lot of things that's kind of flying up about this team, and they have so many more questions than answers right now. But that's why that volatility is there. The floor, probably like 9 wins, I would say. That's the absolute lowest I would say they would be. But then you could absolutely see Josh Allen just going nuclear this season, putting the entire roster on his back in shootout form because of the defensive mess, and them somehow getting to 11, 12 wins. It's totally up in the air.
And if Josh Allen goes God mode, I think this is his MVP season with all those new additions. It's really going to come down to him and how he makes everything fit. You had a Stephon Diggs and all those veterans in the past. Maybe the way that the voters looked at it maybe watered down his ability to win the MVP. But hey, with this squad, if they're able to get to where they want to go, it's going to be pretty much not all, but it's going to be very dependent on Josh Allen. And you mentioned the wide receiver group. I'd like to break that down a little bit. You have Keon Coleman. You mentioned Khalil Shakir and Kincaid. Those are really the big names, but Curtis Samuel also going to be a key cog in this passing game and maybe even the running game as we saw throughout the preseason. Mac Hollins, I think, is going to have a little bit of a bigger role than people assume. I think you could see 40, 50 catches out of him. How do you see the wide receiver group? Who do you see kind of rising to the top? Obviously, Kincaid expected to be that big target guy at the tight end position. But when it comes to wide receiver, other than Shakir, maybe because he kind of proved himself last year, how do you see that shaking out with all the new additions in the wide receiver room?
Yeah, it seems like a really flat room in terms of their potential, of their individual potential. Like Khalil Shakir, I really like him. Is he anything more than a 70% snap slot receiver? I'm not sure that he is, and I'm not sure that they view him to be that way. And then on top of that, you have Keon Coleman, and he's still got to go through his paces. Curtis Samuel has a little bit of gadget to his game. I'm anticipating they're going to use him a lot in the quick game, trying to get him some runway to get some yards after the catch and bring on yardage that way. So there's just a lot going on with this receiver room. And then Matt Collins, who can just kind of fill in for both the X receiver role, the Z receiver role. I'm not exactly sold that one of these guys are going to become the guy for Josh Allen. I think it might just wind up being a bunch of role players and Josh Allen and finding a connection with one of them on a given game, and that might vary week to week, as opposed to what we have seen in previous years with Stephon Diggs usually being the guy week in and week out. And whether that will be better for the offense, we don't know, but it for sure will be different, and different is always exciting to watch.
Yeah, for sure. That's one thing I think is going to be for certain this year for fans, media members alike. It's going to be very intriguing watching this team week after week, especially in the early going, just to figure out what everything's going to look like and who's going to step to the forefront. And another position where someone needs to step to the forefront, edge rusher. You lose Leonard Floyd, your leading sack getter from last season. Greg Rousseau and Ajay Epinesa have been trending positively. I think in recent seasons. Greg Rousseau dealt with some injuries last year. Epinesa maybe a little bit more so, trending in that upward direction. Von Miller, God knows what we're going to get from him this year. What do you see from the edge rusher position? Do they have enough to pressure the quarterback on a consistent basis? Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have been desperate to find pass rushers throughout their tenure. Really haven't been able to lock it down. Thought they had it with Von Miller at the beginning of that one season until he got hurt. How do you see this shaking out? Do you see any lesser-known commodities, maybe a Javon Solomon or somebody like that, rising to the forefront and producing 5+ sacks?
Yeah, I think they're going to depend a lot on Ed Oliver, honestly. Not as an edge rusher, but to be able to push the pocket from the interior to collapse to the quarterback, so that way it helps out all the guys on the outside. I thought Greg Rousseau was awesome in camp this year. Really looked like he has the potential to take that next step in his career. As you pointed out, injuries have kind of bogged him down when it seemed like he was about to take that next step. Like not last year, a couple of years ago when he had the high ankle sprain at Ford Field in Detroit, it really looked like he was about to ascend into this next tier of what he could be as a pass rusher. And then that high ankle sprain completely zapped him of everything he did early on in the season. But I think he's fully healthy now. It seems like highly intentional is the term I would use for what he tried to work on this offseason. So he's their best bet. And then the rest of it, it's up in the air. Epinesa has shown flashes here and there, got a little bit more consistent. Is he ever going to be a hell-raising sack artist? Probably not. Dwayne Smoot is more of a rotational guy. Von Miller, I'm not sold that he's anything more than a 20 to 25 snap guy per game if he's healthy. And then I do like Javon Solomon. You brought him up at the end. He showed some real pass rushing juice. I just wonder how much they would put on his plate early on in the season, which would give them more inclination to do it as it goes on in the later part of the year. But he needs to flash when he gets those opportunities to be able to do it. So that's a very finite spot for him where he's like, okay, you get 5-6 snaps a game, do something.
All on third down.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see those two positions. And in today's NFL, obviously wide receiver and edge rusher, two of the most important positions on the field, and so many question marks at both of those spots. And another big question mark at linebacker. You lose Matt Milano, like you mentioned. Dorian Williams comes in. Are we sold on him as Matt Milano's replacement this season until perhaps Milano comes back? Is there a chance for Balin Spector to work in there or somebody else to step in? Nicholas Moreau obviously has plenty of experience playing at the NFL level. Are they going to give Dorian Williams a long runway, as you say, or are they going to keep a short leash on him and maybe look to mix and match at that position?
Yeah, I would expect them to give him a good shot at it to begin the year, because they did invest a pretty high draft pick in him, and that usually goes well, and that usually does well for opportunity on the field in most cases in Buffalo, unless the guy just can't play. And so Dorian Williams, they'll give him that. I would maybe think like, okay, first month of the season is probably a good point to where you get a good gauge about what they are as a player. But it also comes down to it where they could be in a pretty interesting situation in terms of win-loss record through those 4 games, because let's not forget about their early season schedule. Cardinals, which is a sneaky game, Miami, down in Miami on a Thursday night game.
5 days later.
5 days later. Then you have Jacksonville, who could be a playoff team this year. It looks like they're much improved from last year. Then Baltimore, and that's your first month of the season. And then past that, you get Houston and the Jets right after it on the road. So that kind of seems like a good decision-making time for a lot of different stuff, whether it be at safety, linebacker. Dorian Williams needs to prove that he can correctly defend play action. Flat out. That's what is challenged. That's what has challenged him the most. And he has the athleticism. He makes a lot of wow plays when he guesses right, but when he guesses wrong, oh my goodness, is he wrong? And that's what they kind of need to cut through throughout this. And that's why the loss of Matt Milano is such a huge one. I mean, you go from him to now this guy who's just a completely volatile asset that could cost you dearly within a game. They also don't have as much flexibility as they did last year when they went to Tyrell Dodson at the outside linebacker role after Matt Milano went down with an injury. And Dodson has a lot of the same issues, not as athletically gifted as Dorian Williams, but a lot of the same issues in terms of being more of a run stuffer than a coverage guy. And they masked it by taking him off the field on third downs in obvious passing situations. They don't have that flexibility anymore. Jordan Poyer is not walking through that door to be able to go down in the box. Taylor Rapp, if you move him down to the box, then you're putting one of Damar Hamlin or Mike Edwards or Cole Bishop on the field. It's just, they just don't have that depth anymore at safety. So it's a big issue. And the number one way to rectify it would be if Dorian Williams figures this thing out.
How about Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott? A lot of conversation about their quote unquote job security. I'm pretty certain it's relatively secure, but things could always go disastrous this season. So how do you view their job security in terms of this season and beyond? What would need to happen in order for that to be called into question by the franchise? And just how do you see that whole situation?
I think Beane is safe no matter what. He has a lot of goodwill within the building. He has built everything up. And this is now the beginning of the second iteration of the Bills roster under Josh Allen. So I don't think that they would ever cut that vision short, especially with all the success that they've had. And similarly with Sean McDermott, for Sean to go, it would need to be an all worlds collapse with Josh Allen not getting injured. And I don't know that it can be an all worlds collapse with Josh Allen healthy. I think he'll just will them to some wins in this season because he's one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. So my stock answer has been, unless this thing really goes off the rails and Josh doesn't get hurt, Sean's fine, Brandon's fine. And even if it does, I think they're still probably fine because of all the winning that they've done in Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm with you. And with the new stadium coming up, you
Bingo.
Don't really want to go through a organizational transition and open a new stadium with a lot of question marks in terms of that. Final question, Joe. Do you see this team still built as a Super Bowl contender? That's another burning question year in and year out with Bills fans. I think it's going to take a lot for them to accomplish that this year, but I see it as, if everything goes right, I think that's still in the realm of possibility for this group.
It just begins and ends with Josh Allen. Like if he goes into a type of season that we haven't seen from him with this supporting cast, then anything is on the table. But the way that this team is structured right now and all the questions they have, specifically on defense, I don't know that they're going to be as good of a regular season team as we have seen them be over the past 4 years or so. But I will say, once the season goes along, Sean McDermott and his staff are usually very good at making in-season adjustments, whether it be with personnel, starting lineup decisions, everything along those lines. He usually has a good grasp on what levers to pull, and to the point where I would not be surprised if the Bills are one of the hottest teams in the AFC heading towards the playoffs, which could absolutely open up that Super Bowl window that we're talking about. But I think there's a legitimate chance early on people are going to be like, what is going on here? Because I could easily see them being 2-4 through those first 6 games. It's just a gauntlet, and they get a little bit of a break from that point forward. And then near the end of the season, they have a 3-game in 4-game stretch of playing 3 legit Super Bowl contenders, being the Chiefs, the Niners, and the Lions. So there's no breaks this year, except for the end of the season when they play the Patriots 2 out of 3 weeks. So that's it. But yeah, it's I think they do have the potential to be a much better team by the end of the year than they will be heading in.
No rest for the weary, as they say, and there will be no rest for the weary for us starting on Wednesday when the Bills return to the practice field in front of the media. Joe, thank you for joining us. Can you tell the people where they can find your work?
Oh yeah, you can find me over at The Athletic. I write way too many words over there, and usually they're all analytical. Features every once and again, and you can also listen to my podcast, The Buffalo Beat, wherever you get your podcasts.
Great stuff, Joe. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks,
All right, good stuff from Joe, as always. A first-time guest on the show and really a legend in the Buffalo sports media sphere. He's been around for quite some time and still a young man. And looks like Joe could really go out there and compete with some of these athletes with that height. Maybe a tight end spot, you and him, tight end 3 and 4 for the Bills this year. Maybe if some injuries come up.
Run some more 12, Joe Brady. Run some more 12.
Or
right. 13. Get me, Joe, and Dalton Kincaid out there.
Let's just start running 16 personnel. Let's just have tight ends all over the field. I think that's what the Bills are trending towards. But without further ado, we'll get to our next guest, Nate Geary from WGR 550. All right, here with Nate Geary, host at WGR 550 and Everything Extraordinaire, scratch golfer. I always like to shout out there, maybe giving him a little too much credit. But Nate, thank you for joining us. And how are you, my friend?
Pleasure, man. I'm well, it's game week, but like for real, not like a fake preseason game week. It's legitimately game week. And it's just like that. It's like flip of a calendar, September 1st, chilly in the evening. Football's in the air. I got a million podcasts lined up. It's just like, one day it's here and then you blink an eye and it's January and you're, hosting playoff games. So long story short, don't take the next couple of months for granted, especially the month of September. Great football, great weather. And obviously the home opener this Sunday should be a blast.
Yeah, there's a line in the book, The Great Gatsby. Life starts all over again when it gets crisp in the fall. And boy, oh boy, is that true for Bills season. And we're ready for the Bills life to begin anew this year, a big transition that they're entering this season. And the way that I view it, their floor might be as low as it's been in the past few years. You get rid of all those veterans, but with so many new players and the untapped potential is what I keep pointing towards. There's so many players that could go either way. Yes, they could kind of swing the negative direction and maybe not perform how the Bills are expecting, or they could outdo those expectations that have been set on them, namely a Keon Coleman or some of the new defensive players, namely at the safety position. But how do you view the Bills entering this season? Maybe your perspective on the ceiling floor discussion or kind of anywhere you want to go with it, just your overall takeaways from the offseason leading into the regular season.
Yeah, turbulence, I mean, listen, anytime you have the sort of rebuilds, the sort of transition, which I think largely has been the word used by the franchise, by Brandon Beane, and by fans. It's not a rebuild, it's a transition. But I mean, it's cut from the same cloth, right? And I think when you have Josh Allen, when you have a franchise level quarterback like him and like Patrick Mahomes, you never really do full rebuilds. They are kind of on the fly rebuilds. And that's what you're seeing here. The Bills are incredibly limited by the cap space and the cap money available to them while they pay Stephon Diggs a record for a non-quarterback and dead cap money. So while they're doing that, they're attempting to remain competitive and field a competitive roster. I think they will field a very competitive roster, but I think it's a largely unproven roster, to your point. And, I like the ceiling versus floor conversation where those things have moved, but I think largely they're asking Josh Allen to do what the Kansas City Chiefs asked of Patrick Mahomes, which is for right now, you got to win with less. And, this year we're going to find out just how much the MVP award is really, truly the best player on the best team. I think last year probably sealed the deal for most people who thought that's where the award was going. But if Josh Allen has a similar season, a similar output, the Bills win 10 games, 11 games, and they do it with the supporting cast that they have, it's going to be really hard to deny Josh Allen an MVP, because I think it will require an MVP level performance from Josh this year to overcome some of the new faces and really just lack of experience at primary or key positions across the roster, both offensively and defensively. And obviously the loss of Matt Milano, it hurts. I think there's a lot of excitement about getting him back. I think I'm going to take one bright side out of the Matt Milano situation is I think this injury will likely allow the Bills not to force him back. I'm not here to tell you I think, he wasn't 100%. I don't know Matt Milano. I don't know his body, and I don't know where he was within the injury, but I could tell there have been times during practices or early during training camp where it still looked like he maybe wasn't 100% confident on that leg. So this gives him the opportunity for that thing to heal completely and hopefully get him back for a December run. And I think that will go a long way. But for me, this is a year in transition, and I still think they should be. I know a couple sports books have them have now the Jets in the lead in terms of best odds to win the division, but they've got the best coach and they've got the best quarterback, and I think that matters in today's NFL.
You talk about the Patrick Mahomes and relying on him to do more with less. I think he did the most with the least he's ever had at his disposal last season. And hey, it worked out. They won the Super Bowl. So I think that's certainly in play. We'll get to that conversation maybe a little bit later, but you kind of went exactly where I want to go next. The AFC East landscape and the Jets really, it all comes down to health for them, right? You have Rodgers. He plays 4 plays last year. You bring in all the weapons, but it's very volatile in terms of the return that you're going to get on the investment that you made. Hey, Hassan Reddick is still over in Japan. So kind of similarly to the Bills, the Jets, there's a lot of variance there in how things could go. But before we get to, I guess, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Patriots specifically, where do you see the Bills fitting into the AFC East pecking order? Are they still far and away the leader in this division? Is there more competition for that division title than ever? Where do you see them sitting entering the regular season?
Listen, I think the last couple of years, the division, in sort of in large part after the transition away from Tom Brady and the Patriots, obviously that's a team that right now is sitting at the bottom of the division and starting Jacoby Brissett, which is a little bit of a head scratcher. But I mean, the beginning part of their schedule is about as difficult as anyone in football. So protecting their young quarterback maybe a little bit, knowing that they're having trouble protecting the quarterback with the offensive line, poor Jacoby Brissett going out there to basically be a battering ram. It's tough, but certainly the Jets, I don't think are necessarily better than they were last year. I still think they're a similar team than how they were walking into week one. Obviously they still find a way with Zach Wilson to beat the Bills week one. And I think Aaron Rodgers is now 2 full seasons removed for meaningful football. And I think that it's harder to come back and play at a high level after missing the amount of time that Aaron Rodgers has missed. Just ask a much younger version of Deshaun Watson, who has still really not found his footing in Cleveland after missing several seasons due to off the field issues and injury concerns. So, do I think the Jets have a good roster? Absolutely. Do I think that they probably have, if you looked at the top 10 players of each roster in the AFC East, that they're probably right there at the top. I mean, it's not obviously Hassan Reddick is a name that if he gets added to that list, makes that defense even more formidable. But I think that they've got a very solid top of roster, but I think their issue continues to be the bottom of that roster, and that's the same issue that the Dolphins are only leaning into that more. I mean, they have 2 receivers making top 5 money, and Jalen Waddle and now Tyreek Hill after that reworked contract, and had to let go of Robert Hunt this offseason, did not address the offensive line at all. That might go down as one of the worst units in the league in Miami. And, you can practice all the falling you want, but part of the reason that I thought that the Dolphins were better last year is that the offensive line played better, and it helped in the running game. And if the Dolphins can't run like they did last year, if they're not opening holes the way they were opening holes last year for 2 running backs that are very fast, but also are not going to shake off a lot of contact. When guys get their hands on them, they're going to go down. And I think the big part of what made Devon Achane so successful is he was running through giant holes. So if their offensive line can't produce at that level and create the space that they created last year for Mozart and Achane when he was healthy, I'm not convinced the Dolphins are really a team pushing for this division. So I think that the team that no one's really talked about taking the most significant step back is, in fact, the Dolphins. I think for whatever reason,
especially
they're
on
not getting
the defensive side of the ball, particularly.
Yeah, and listen, all of their players took the opportunity to throw Vic Fangio, who is just arguably the most successful defensive coach of the last decade in the NFL, under the bus for their struggles last year, and not their frankly lack of play when they played any offense worth a damn. So yeah, I think the Dolphins, both from a roster perspective, but from just generally and specifically a huge step back on the offensive line. I don't think they're a team that's going to mimic the success that they had, especially early last year. I think the team we saw towards the end of last season is more the team that that you should expect to see this year. And then again, as the Jets go, they're going to go as far as Aaron Rodgers takes them, and it's pretty unprecedented. It's happened, one time. Tom Brady has skewed a little bit of the conversation about what 40-year-old quarterbacks can do in the NFL, especially ones coming off of an injury like an Achilles tendon tear. So we'll see. I'm color me not super sold on either a division opponents, but they're certainly are sort of catching up on some ground on the Bills from a roster perspective.
What's the ceiling for the Jets, in your opinion, if Rodgers is to stay healthy? You mentioned the talent around him. I mean, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, you're bringing in Mike Williams if he's able to get on the field week 1 and remain healthy. The offensive line, obviously a huge question mark in New York as well. But that defense is talented as any in the league. If Rodgers stays healthy, how good could they be? Could they potentially be a Super Bowl contender? Do you believe in them to that extent if Rodgers is able to stay on the field?
I'm not buying them as a Super Bowl contender. I mean, Rodgers would have to have an MVP level season. I am very skeptical he has that ability. I think he's way more of the guy you saw in 2022 at the end of the season with Green Bay, who was coming back from albeit a broken thumb that he played with on his throwing hand for most of the season. But I think that's the player. I think the last time I think Joe DiBiase had the stat. The last time Aaron Rodgers threw for 300 yards, or it was Ben Roethlisberger has thrown for 300 yards more recently than Aaron Rodgers. That is a pretty remarkable statistics, whatever.
That's an indictment. That's an indictment.
Yeah. And, do I like Garrett Wilson? I do. I think he's a very, very elite talent. I think they've got nothing at the wide receiver position outside of him. I think that, Allen Lazard was a move that Aaron Rodgers wanted to make, and he stinks. Doesn't really have the traits of a true number 2 wide receiver. And Mike Williams is coming off of his second consecutive season-ending injury, and a player that did not look the same coming off his previous one. So, yeah, I think a lot of it relies on how good Aaron Rodgers is going to be. And if Aaron Rodgers is a game manager and he's going to go out there and throw for 24 touchdowns, 3,800 yards, a couple of interceptions, sure, they can go out there, win 11 games, win a division. But I don't mistake them having the chance to win a division with them being true Super Bowl contenders. There are a number of teams ahead of them that I'd place as a true Super Bowl contender. And I'm not of the mind that you can have 7 AFC Super Bowl contenders. I don't really think that's the world we're living in. So if you're telling me that they're getting MVP Aaron Rodgers back and he's going to go out there and throw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns, sure, they're a Super Bowl contender. But right now, I don't see it.
Yeah, big if there. Certainly after last year, you trot them out with all the pomp and circumstance. In the NFL, they put up their week 1 video, and sure enough, the first little snippet was Aaron Rodgers' entire 2023 season, him running onto the field with that American flag. But let's dig a little bit deeper into the Dolphins. We could kind of start with Tua, and then I want to move to the defensive side of the ball where they really lost a lot, and they're a team in transition, a little bit banged up as well at the edge rusher position.
No kidding.
Tua gets the contract. You bring in an Odell Beckham and the rookie, I believe Jalen Wright is his name, the running back. So you add speed on speed there. Tua, like I said, he gets paid, but you lose so much on the defensive side of the ball. Are they going to be – you mentioned it already in your previous response that you're not sure if they're going to be the Dolphins of old. What do you see from Tua going into this year after getting paid? And then obviously the defensive side of the ball, Chop Robinson, they're hoping for a lot out of him, but Jalen Phillips coming back from an injury and some more injuries at that edge rusher position. Are they going to be able to stop anybody is I guess my flat out question about the Dolphins.
Extensions for Mike McDaniel and for Tua before they win a playoff game. And I get it because I think those two are married together. If you're signing Tua, then you need to keep Mike McDaniel around. I think that with the contract is going to become with the contract comes elevated expectations. And the things and the mistakes that Tua makes down the stretch every year when, they need plays. The interception to Taylor Rapp last year, it's just a terrible throw. And you can live and die by the big play, which they did early in the season last year. They scored 70 points against, the Denver Broncos, and then they come to Buffalo and get absolutely blanked the following week. So the Bills have their number. I don't know that they did enough for me to convince me that all of a sudden that's going to change this year. And you're right. The defensive side of the ball is an interesting because I think Chop Robinson's big, strong, and physical, but he tested through the roof. His speed numbers, one of the fastest 40-yard dash times for an edge player, especially at his size. That's impressive. Getting Bradley Chubb coming back from the ACL, Jalen Phillips coming back from the Achilles. They've got a lot of banged up pieces on the defensive line. And listen, I Dolphins fans do a better job selling the moves that their team makes in the offseason. But is anyone? I literally saw Dolphins fans suggesting that Calais Campbell, in for who did they just lose in the offseason? They lost Christian Wilkins, right?
Right.
So they lose Christian Wilkins, and somehow Calais Campbell in his 20th season is some level of a lateral move. I'm not seeing it. He set the market for interior defensive linemen in free agency with Las Vegas. They're going to miss him. I know that they think that Jordan Brooks is the next coming of Brian Urlacher, but he was drafted in the first round by the Seattle Seahawks and not given a second contract. So they've got some pieces in the middle of that defense, David Long and Jordan Brooks, and athletic, but guys that, largely have been replacement level players. Javon Holland is going to be due for a big payday, and I don't think the Dolphins are going to be able to do it. They're probably going to have to let Javon Holland walk, and I think he's one of the key pieces to that defensive backfield. Jordan Poyer is their starting strong safety. So, and listen, this is not a shot at Poe. He just didn't have it anymore. His counterpart retired. So I think for me, says a lot that they're relying on Jordan Poyer to, listen, if Dolphins fans came back and, well, he's going to largely play, as a box defender. Well, if you're going to run one high safeties against the likes of Josh Allen and these other quarterbacks in the AFC, good luck. That's not a recipe for stopping the pass in the league right now. That's why Vic Fangio came in. That's why he, really made popular the two deep shell across the NFL. And if that's what they're doing, they're putting Jordan Poyer back there in two deep shell. Opposing quarterbacks are going to take advantage of that all day long. So, their defense, I'm not impressed with. I think their defensive line took a big step back, or they're relying on guys coming back from significant injuries late in the last season. By the way, these aren't September injuries; these are December injuries. And Von Miller is in his 30s. These guys are still in their young to late 20s, but those injuries can linger, especially at a position where you're expected to really be able to use your athleticism and bend around the corner of an offensive lineman. So yeah, I'm not sold on the Dolphins defense getting better and maybe taking a step back, but what they're even able to do with the future of locking up, I think their best defensive player in Javon Holland is going to be tough for them. And then, I mentioned the offensive line earlier. I don't exactly know what the plan was. And listen, I'm a big Notre Dame fan. Everybody knows that. Liam Eichenberg is not a starting caliber offensive. You got me?
It's all good. I lost you at Liam Eichenberg, not a starting offensive lineman. Just start it. I'm a big Notre Dame fan.
Listen, I'm a big Notre Dame fan, and I'll try to defend a Notre Dame Fighting Irish player as much as I can, but Liam Eichenberg is not a starting offensive lineman in the NFL, and I think they're relying on him to be that. So, I think there's a lot of question marks on an offensive line. They're young, they're inexperienced, and I think that's a team that they think, I think it feels like the philosophy is, we're going to get rid of the ball so fast it won't matter. But teams caught up to that last year. And if Tua can't get to his second, third, or fourth reads because, he's got guys in his face, then what was the point of going to get Odell Beckham Jr., who, by the way, is starting the season on the PUP list? So,
yeah, and Tua came out and said it. He said he was asked about his offensive line. He said, it doesn't really matter. I get the ball out so fast. And if you're going to rely on 5-yard completions all season, I'm not sure that's going to work, especially come playoff time. We're not going to spend much time on the Patriots. You mentioned it already. They're not really a factor in the division. You're starting Jacoby Brissett. I think that's kind of waving the white flag on the season before it even starts. Let's look at the rest of the AFC. You have the Texans. You have so many teams, the Chiefs, the Ravens. You mentioned how there might not be 7 Super Bowl contenders, but there are contenders all over this conference, and a lot of them littered on the Bills' schedule. And then you have the non-conference opponents on the Bills' schedule as well. But how about these AFC opponents that the Bills are going to face this year, and how the landscape of the entire conference is shaking up with the Ravens adding a Derrick Henry, the Chiefs getting stronger year by year. How does it look to you?
The Ravens, to me, are another team that took, I think, a pretty big step back that not a lot of people are talking about. And listen, Derrick Henry 4 years ago, man, that would have been a very scary proposition. The Tennessee Titans were better when Tajay Spears was on the field and Derrick Henry was off of it. So, what is Derrick Henry? Is Derrick Henry going to be better than Gus Edwards was in the red zone? Probably not. He was one of the most efficient quarterbacks around the 5-yard line in the NFL, had more 1-yard touchdowns than anybody in the NFL last year outside of Jalen Hurts. So is he going to be better on the 1-yard line? I would say probably not. And I don't think at this point in his career that he's the type of player that an offense with Lamar Jackson should have really prioritized this offseason. So, they lose in Odell Beckham and they didn't really replace him. And Rashad Bateman's been in and out of the lineup, for the first couple of years of his career, and he's going to be relied on to be their primary number 2 receiver. I don't think Zay Flowers is a true number 1. And Mark Andrews will be back. So we'll see what that looks like. But losing Patrick Queen, that's not to me a team that took a big step this offseason. If anything, I think took a step back, but I still think that they'll be right there in the mix. Obviously, Kansas City. Houston's a team that I think everyone's going to talk about because of the amount of moves that they made this offseason, trading for and going out to get Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs. I mean, 2 older veteran moves. And Mixon was a little bit of a head scratcher. He was sort of getting pushed out of that role by Chase Brown towards the end of last season. The Bengals are another team. They go out and get Zach Moss and, Jamar Chase. Is he going to be in the starting lineup? Because without Chase and Higgins, the Cincinnati Bengals are not a contender in the AFC without Jamar Chase healthy and on the field playing football for them. So the team that I'm actually maybe most interested in the AFC, well, there's 2 teams and they're both in the same division, is the Tennessee Titans. and the Indianapolis Colts. I like what the Titans did this offseason. They surrounded a young core. They're going to get a true look at Will Levis this year. And, there's not going to be a lot of excuses. I think they surrounded him with really solid talent. Calvin Ridley going to get Tyler Boyd. They got Tony Pollard, so they got a nice 1-2 punch with Pollard and Spears. They added some pieces on the offensive line and a new coaching staff's in there. So Tennessee's an interesting team. And obviously Indianapolis, if Anthony Richardson can be the guy I think everyone has predicted and can get close to that ceiling, Indianapolis is a scary, scary team. They've got pieces all over the place, a good defensive line that they've spent a lot of money and assets, high draft capital into. And I really like the young receiver core they've got of Michael Pittman Jr., A.D. Mitchell, and Josh Downs in the slot. And, I know a lot of people were a little worried about, the Xavier Worthy versus Keon Coleman conversation, but the Bills aren't going to be the only team, I think, maybe second guessing their decision to let A.D. Mitchell fall as late into the second round as he did and get scooped up by the Colts. I think he's going to be their number 2 receiver outside of Pittman. And obviously you still got Jonathan Taylor in that backfield and Quentin Nelson in the interior of that offensive line. That's a very interesting team this year moving forward in the AFC for sure.
Yeah, I like that call with Indianapolis. If Richardson and Taylor can stay healthy, certainly a dangerous combo in that backfield. Let me ask you this one final question. Are the Bills still Super Bowl caliber? Can they still have that as their best case scenario? You lose so many players. I know the easy answer is you still have Josh Allen. You can win it all. But is that supporting cast truly good enough to help them get through some tough times and maybe some down moments? We've seen Josh Allen struggle in a few games here the past few seasons. So do they have enough supporting cast-wise to reach that mountaintop that they've been trying to climb?
Let me ask you this. If you sit in the camp of, maybe they're not in that Super Bowl, top tier Super Bowl window, but they're still capable, right? Their best case scenario can still be a Super Bowl appearance or even a win. How much of your attitude, how much of your confidence in this team changes if, week 1, Keon Coleman goes 6 for, 115 in the score, and, Kincaid goes for 7 for 90 in a score, and the Bills win by 2 touchdowns, and Christian Benford gets an interception, and Taylor Rapp is all over the field. Like, I can tell you that right now on paper before the games are played, I'm not sure this is a better football team than they were last year talent-wise. They don't have the blue chip talent that they had from a couple of years ago when Trey White was one of the best corners in the league, and he had maybe the best safety duo in the league and maybe the best linebacker duo in the league. And, Von Miller coming into that 2022 season after getting signed in the offseason and him having 8 sacks in the first couple of weeks and really looking like the missing piece. It's a very different team now. But if they have blue chip players, we're going to have to find them, and they're going to have to find them quick. So I think for me, the conversation can all change once the games start getting played and this team, they got guys that step up, but we just don't know who those players will be quite yet. But if they get, 100 yards in the debut with Keon Coleman, how much does that change everyone's conversation, not just Bills fans, but how the national media is looking at this team? If they give a true weapon at the wide receiver position break out early in the season, I think it'll go a long way, for the confidence that not only, Bills fans have, but the media have in the Bills as well.
No doubt it could make everybody forget about Stephon Diggs and all the other veterans they lost very, very quickly if they burst out of the gate. I was at dinner with my family the other night, though, and I said this to them. If they're losing at any point, unless it's just like an opening drive field goal for the Cardinals, and if they're losing at any point during that game against Arizona, Twitter is going to go ablaze and with people's concerns. So it's definitely, there's a chance for it to swing one way or the other. If they come out and they go gangbusters, I think it could really turn the tide and relieve some of the concerns that people have. But on the other side, if they come out and lay an egg, it's really going to get the torches and pitchforks out very, very quickly. But Nate, thank you for joining us. Tell the people where they can find you. I'm sure they know already, but why don't you run through it for them?
Yeah, on Twitter at Nate Geary Sports. I'll be hammering away here in the next week, and obviously on game days, big presence online, so you can check me out there. WGR550.com. I'll be doing pregame, halftime, and postgame again this year, like my normal duties, and get ready for another season, man. I'm excited.
All right, Nate, enjoy some fall golf, and we'll catch you next time.
Sounds good, my friend. Thanks for having me.
All right, AJ, that's going to do it for today's show. And just to cap this episode, we didn't get a chance to discuss it yesterday. We did a morning pod, not an afternoon pod. The captains, the two captains, Josh Allen and Terrell Bernard, and then the 10-man leadership council, an interesting move from Sean McDermott and company, led to some interesting reactions on social media. But I think that's what suits this team best. You have Josh Allen working his way into a much more distinguished leadership role. He is the voice of this team. And then you have Terrell Bernard on the defensive side of the ball. What he did last year, really taking hold of this defense. I think you need that 1-2 punch. And then you have the 10 other guys that are going to have a voice in that leadership room as well. And then Damar Hamlin being named the starter at safety. What a journey he has followed since suffering that cardiac arrest during the 2022 season, January of 2023 to be exact, against the Cincinnati Bengals. Came back to the field last year, didn't really see him a lot on defense, and now he's a starter going into week one. Just quite the inspiration. The comeback is complete. Now all that's left is can he perform and hold that starting job with a rookie in Cole Bishop and a veteran free agent that they brought in, Mike Edwards, nipping at his heels.
Yeah, I like the direction that they went with the two captains. I think it's smart. Now, you could say there were some people, Taron Johnson's been here for a while, that he deserved to see on the jersey. Deion Dawkins is another guy that's been here for a long time. Does he deserve to see on the jersey? So there were guys, Terrell Bernard's only going into his second year as a full-time starter. But I think, like you said, with the 10-man leadership council, I think, I don't really know if Taron Johnson really cares about having a C or a Deion Dawkins. Like, I think they already have, they've been there so long that they are the leaders as well. Like, it's not just going to be the guys with the C. You've seen in the past, like a Jack Eichels rocked the C, but was he truly a C? Stephon Diggs rocked the C. Was he truly a C? So the C on the jersey, it does matter to an extent. It's obviously a very, uplifting thing for players, especially, a Terrell Bernard who, is really just, it's insane to think about a guy, third-round pick, comes out, plays limited snaps, and then comes out last year, balls out, and now he's a captain. So I like it. Terrell Bernard's the collar of the defense. Josh Allen's the collar of the offense. And they're two really ascending players that are in the prime of their careers, and they've done everything to deserve it. The Damar Hamlin story, I mean, what a great, kind of thing, right? It's just kind of a storybook ending, per se, for Damar Hamlin to get this start 2024 after not really
storybook beginning, some may say.
Storybook beginning, yeah. So that's it's awesome for Damar. We'll see how he produces. That's the thing is, once football starts, Bills fans, I'm sure, will get it out of their mind if he starts not playing great. So he does have pressure on him to perform still. And that's what he's going to have to do. Sean McDermott trusts him, and he's earned this spot. I thought he's had a really good training camp and preseason.
Before we get out of here, we'll thank our sponsor once again, Forefathers Organics in Dansville.
Unlock the power of nature with Forefathers Organics, your premium CBD store. We offer the highest quality CBD and hemp products to liberate your mind, body, and soul, helping you live happy and free. Our mission is driven by excellence and transparency, using cutting-edge scientific methods to combat stress and target issues at their source. From potent ingestible CBD to soothing topicals, all our products are USDA certified organic. Discover all natural wellness from farm to table. Visit forefathersorganics.com for more information.
All right, AJ, that's going to do it. Week one approaching quickly. We will see you next time.
Peace out.